Welcome to the ColivingCircle podcast. I am your host and the founder of ColivingCircle, Paul Burke. ColivingCircle, find co-living. Thanks for joining me. This is a different episode than some of the others we've recorded. As you can see, there are no guests. I'm recording this on May 1st. I have the quarantine haircut, which is just like long and straggly and in desperate need of some attention. However, I do not have any barber I can give a house call to, but regardless, bear with me. Today, what we're going to talk about is something we've explored the last several episodes at least, and we've talked about on our blog, podcasts, Medium page, and it's the impact the coronavirus is having on co-living. And certainly, there's a lot of things happening in the world, and co-living represents a very small sector. But the impact it is having on co-living is tremendous. And we've talked to Jade Brandias, who's a member of a co-living space here in Los Angeles. We've talked to Kate Maloney, who manages Startup Home in England. We've talked to Karen, who's an executive director for cohousing.org. And so we've got a few different perspectives that we've explored. And then on my own, I've talked to some co-living managers who have sort of given me the skinny on how things are going in their building. And I just want to explore that and summarize it so that there's just a good picture of what's happening, because I'm also going to give some insight into what I think is going to happen after this. And it seems like people are getting very restless. We're getting closer to the end, although we don't really know. That may just be, we may be ending the quarantine, but that doesn't mean the virus is gone, and we're still very susceptible to it. Just that people are restless and they want to get out of their house and they want to stop wearing masks and they want to get back to life as usual. And I think that's understandable. We're all feeling that to some extent, but we don't know what is safe or not safe really yet. And so this is a very fluid situation. I want to talk about a couple things. One being how this is affecting co-living members. And one thing that we've found is that a lot of co-living members are quarantining elsewhere. They're going to live with family. They're going home. They are trying to practice social distancing. And that can be especially hard in a co-living space where you're not renting out a unit, you're renting out the room. So you're likely sharing a bathroom, a kitchen, places where germs can spread easily among roommates and other people you're coming in contact with. And Jade Brandias is quarantining elsewhere other than Treehouse Co-Living, which is, by the way, just a magical space. We've written about it quite a bit. But she's quarantining elsewhere because it's really a massive building, around 60 units. And there's basically 4 rooms per unit from at least what I saw. And you are sharing a lot of things. And if you're highly susceptible, then that makes it really difficult to live in a space like that, where you're constantly coming in contact with other people and everyone has to go get groceries and they're more at risk. Each time you leave the house, you're more at risk, right? So multiply that times 60 people, and we can see how exponentially living at a co-living space gets kind of dangerous. And I think that's how some people are approaching it. And Jade, for one, decided to socially distance herself elsewhere with her family. So that's one perspective, and I think leads into really the state of the industry from a business perspective and how that is affecting co-living managers and operators. And let me read a quote. I'm going to keep it anonymous because I'm sure it reflects a lot of co-living spaces right now, but I don't need to single out any other company who's being more affected by this than others. And I quote, "People are freaking out, some leaving, some without notice. It's been a lot of work to inform our team on the ground how to respond to fears. We're pushing our members to mind their hygiene." And that's really the best that you can do. If you operate a co-living space, I can't imagine how hard it is right now to run the business while at the same time helping people remain safe and socially distance as we are supposed to. Here's a couple responses that are public that I'll go through real quick. You can also go on our Medium page and look up how the coronavirus is impacting co-living. Outside and a few others are taking extra precautions, doing things like preventing tenants from hand washing dishes, canceling events, supplying additional supplies like hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, paper towels, that sort of thing, which is great. As far as cleaning comes, some people are increasing the cleanings from once every couple weeks to once a week to make sure everything gets properly disinfected. Here's something that I thought is interesting and that a lot of companies are having to deal through right now, which is Outside says our current refund policy still stands. Flexible refunds will be considered for travelers directly impacted by the virus, including those carrying the virus and those traveling through impacted areas. So one of the things that we're going to see is a lot of people breaking leases, a lot of people trying to get out of contracts. And in certain places like Los Angeles, there is basically a pause on rent if need be, where people can basically put off paying rent. I don't know if that's the right thing, but I know that puts a really, really tough time on these co-living spaces who have businesses to run and they have tenants that they need to serve. Here's another quote from a property manager or from a co-living space manager that I'm not going to mention the name. Everyone is in a state of panic, a few summer cancellations. Other than that, we are good in providing all possible methods of precaution. So I think that's the general state of the industry. One thing that is extremely interesting, the CEO of Starcity went on Twitter and said that they collected over 90% of rents in April. I think that's pretty rare. And one thing that he says is co-living will be a resilient asset class during this crisis. And while that may be true for Starcity, that serves, I guess, a sort of higher end co-living resident. There's a lot of people who can't afford Starcity that work jobs where you actually have to be there at location, and maybe those are the people who are more affected, and so it's affecting a different segment of co-living. One thing that Outpost Club is doing is they have a running diary of updates on what their policies, decisions regarding certain things. One being they are not allowing any new guests, and I think that's probably a smart thing and good for the tenants there that want to be as safe as possible. They have a hot deals tab on their website. And, for the people who are breaking their leases or wanting to move out or there's just vacancies, they're being aggressive and still marketing their properties at probably below market rate so they can get some really cash in the door to operate their space, which makes total sense. Not sure how some of the residences probably feel about that, but something worth considering. Let's take a look at the outlook on co-living. I think one of the things that this has highlighted, aside from the business aspect and all that, is we need each other. And there's sort of that phrase, which I think is personally a little corny, like we're all in this together, and we are to some extent. But a country of 330 million people, we're all in some way just trying to survive. And hopefully we're helping each other and extending a helping hand to people who need help. But we do need each other, especially socially. And a lot of people are going stir crazy, missing their friends and family, and even a hug, a handshake, a high five, a pound it, dap, whatever it is. Like, we're missing that social interaction, that physical element that for a lot of us is like almost a love language. And we've heard from a couple people like Kate Maolini and Karin that this is really bringing people together, and it's so much better than living by yourself, being holed up in a studio or one bedroom and not having anybody to talk with, to be with, to see, to hear and in person, not over the phone, not Skype, not Zoom, but just in person. And I think we're going to see co-living really take off once this thing gets to an end, if this thing gets to an end. I'm going to read a quote by Brad Hargraves, who's the CEO of Common, which is a very large living space. He said, "It doesn't change my view about co-living. The people who are dropping are not dropping because they got skittish about co-living. They're dropping because they lost their job, they decide not to move, or there is some fundamental change in circumstance." And I think that's right. I think he summed it up great. People don't dislike co-living. In fact, they love it. And the people who are in there and going to get over this together are going to love it even more. And I think be really good, basically, sirens as to why co-living is so important and why it can really go a long way in solving loneliness. And that's something I've really sought to understand, is how co-living gives us the opportunity to not feel lonely while also giving us private space we need. I'm somewhat introverted, so I know I need time for myself. And if co-living provides both of those things, it's really an ideal situation for most people, especially because we're seeing a lot of things like work from home become popular, in which you lack that social interaction. And so co-living basically gives you that. One thing that we've also talked about is how transplants love it. You can get to know a city really fast from being in a co-living space where you have everybody who's more than happy to help out and tell you the best cafe, coffee shop, dinner, fun thing to do, best hike, whatever it is. Co-living spaces and your roommates and neighbors can help you understand that faster than if you just move somewhere by yourself. So I think co-living is really it's taking a hit now, but for the companies that do survive are going to see really massive amounts of demand. And so that is one thing to look forward to, assuming that we can harness this virus. But that remains to be seen. A lot of stuff is unpredictable, and we just got to do the best we can. So I'm going to put in the show notes all the interviews, all the things we've done, so you can read more about how the coronavirus is impacting co-living. One thing I should also mention too is if you go on Google Trends and you look up co-living, basically the graph is like this, and then it's like this. We're at right now the lowest demand for co-living we've seen in years, and yet we're seeing more co-living spaces now than at any point before, and a lot more. So the industry is taking a hit. Residences, to some extent, are taking a hit, and co-living does make social distancing hard. Rolling Stones wrote an article about it. They said, co-living is all about community and close quarters, all of which is antithetical to social distancing. So, yes, that is all true, and the hope and the thought is that it will bounce back, and I believe it will in a very strong way.